And I'm very pleased to have with me the champions for the city of Fort Collins, for Loveland, and for Estes Park here. I'm going to give them just a second to be able to introduce themselves. I do have a couple of questions to kind of spur our discussion, but there'll also be time for you all to ask questions. So feel free to get your thinking cap on, and let's see how we're working together, yeah? Okay, so let's do some introduction. If you would like to just say who you work for, what you do there, why we even care you're here.
I'm not sure I'm going to have much to offer on the last one. But, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Castillo, and I have the honor of serving the city of Fort Collins as the Chief Sustainability Officer. I've been in the role 2.5, almost 3 years. And in Fort Collins, we define sustainability very broadly. So we use the triple bottom line framework: people, planet, or prosperity. And thusly, we're organized as such. I'll get into this in more detail, I think, later on. But we have our work in our environmental services team that does climate action, waste reduction, recycling, air quality. We have social sustainability and neighborhood services. They work on housing, homelessness, affordable housing, human service issues. And then we have economic sustainability, which is work that we do to support thriving economy, supporting small businesses, large firm attraction, and creating an innovation ecosystem. So our sustainability portfolio is based on that triple bottom line: people, planet, and prosperity. And we're looking at ways to better integrate across those platforms. So I'll talk about that more in a minute.
Hi everyone, I'm Brett Stewart. I'm the assistant to the city manager of the city of Loveland. And just quick show of hands, how many of you folks are from Loveland? Okay, we got a few folks, 2, 3. So for those of you who are familiar with Loveland, you might know that the city of Loveland has been relatively new to the space of climate change and sustainability. In 2020, we passed our last version of our citywide strategic plan, which is a very crazy thing, and we added the word sustainability to it, which is, in Loveland, as you know, it's a unique thing that we can actually agree on that word. So I've been with the city for about 3 years. We don't have a sustainability officer, but I've been serving almost in that role, helping try to usher in what we could do to bring sustainability to Loveland, partnering with the county and our neighbors. And there's still a lot of work to do, and I know we'll get into the details, but I've been really happy to work with Heidi and the county on the Climate Smart Future Ready initiative and help move forward our sustainability priorities and initiatives that we'll get into. So good to see all of you.
And last and probably least, Jason Damweber. I'm the Deputy Town Administrator up in Estes Park. And in that capacity, I oversee the town's efforts related to workforce housing, child care. I oversee our fleet facilities, IT, and risk management functions. I oversee the town museum, and then probably most of my job is the other duties as a side category. Similar to Loveland, we don't have anybody in the town. Well, if we didn't have anybody in the town who was kind of the go-to for environmental or sustainability related work or initiatives. That's not to say we didn't have individuals who that was part of their jobs, especially in our utilities departments. Some years ago, the town board put together an environmental sustainability task force and appointed me as the staff liaison to that. And that's kind of how I found myself in the role as sort of the de facto sustainability officer, go-to person for the town. And I've actually worked with the county to select Heidi for her position. Seems
So
like
I owe you, is that what you're saying?
It seems like
You were on the band.
you got a good flavor of Waterloo. So. That kind of plugged me into the county's efforts. And when the Climate Smart Future Ready initiative got underway, that's when Heidi tagged me in to be a part of that initiative as well. So I sit on the executive board of Climate Smart Future Ready. One benefit to that connection, and since I think we're going to be talking a lot about partnerships and collaboration, the town had long wanted to do a climate action plan, at least for our own operations, but the will wasn't there to really put the resources towards doing that. Last year we tried to find students at a graduate school to work on the climate action plan for us as part of a capstone project, or dissertation style, and that didn't work out. But what did work out is when the county got some grant funding and said, hey, we can be your partner there with ICLEI. And so now we are just wrapping up the data collection process related to town operations. We've gotten all that to Heidi and Abby, who are working directly with ICLEI. Just last week, ICLEI reached out to me to get on their portal and to have access to the dashboard that'll have all of that information. So we're probably about halfway through that process. We still have staff interviews to do and things like that. But at some point in 2026, we will have an organization-focused climate action plan, which would not have happened without the partnership that we have with the county.
Can you explain ICLEI as an acronym? What is that?
Abby.
What is it? They used to go by ICLEI and it had a whole word, but now they're just ICLEI.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
local governments for environmental, it's a
It used to
global
be an
group.
acronym and they aren't right.
Yeah, they
They
don't
like
use
it
the
that way.
acronym, but it's,
Okay.
yeah.
It's like Prince. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
Or
What
Madonna or
does it
something.
mean?
Yes, it
So what does
doesn't
it
really.
mean then if it doesn't, if it's?
Yeah, it doesn't. They are a nationwide, actually worldwide organization that work with local governments to develop environmental plans, greenhouse gas inventories, and the like. So it doesn't really stand for,
Okay.
it's a name.
But, okay. At least now I know
Oh,
what
Jason's
you're
gonna look it up.
It used to stand for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, and now it's just ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability.
ICLEI.
Yeah. So great. So I'll thank you all for being here. And thank you all for having some interest in how we're working together. Here's the first question, and I don't care who goes first. I mean, you can go first. Jacob, start us off. What's your biggest sustainability priority, and how are you tackling it?
So I knew this question was coming, and now I'm like, oh man, I should think about that. No, there's maybe a couple different answers. One is what is my biggest priority, which as kind of a bit of a bureaucrat, that is different than kind of like some strategic priorities set by council. And also, I mean, I think as I also kind of contemplate what it looks like to meet the moment, I think there's kind of shifting prioritization. So I'll unpack this. So my priority right now is doing greater integration across all the stuff that I mentioned earlier, like the portfolio of sustainability. So looking at the housing climate nexus, looking at how we create an economy that provides good jobs, upward mobility, that is also doing work toward addressing some of the more parts of the climate crisis. So how do we create like these dynamic, interconnected, interdisciplinary systems is the question I'm asking myself. So internally, what we're trying to prioritize is integration across platforms, so economic development, environmental services, and social sustainability, and looking at how we focus our work and concentrate for, I was gonna say maximal, but I think the right word is optimal impact in our community. So a lot of prioritization, integration across disciplines, and organizing ourselves to be more impactful, getting out of silos, like you mentioned. That's one of my priorities right now. It's kind of like an administrator, like in that function. Council continues to have some very lofty goals, their priorities. I mean, when you look at the goals that we've set in our climate future, which is the City of Fort Collins framework for action around climate, primary goals around being carbon neutral by 2050, 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We will not hit that. And 100% renewable electricity. We are on a path toward hitting that goal. So, and there's nuance around, what it means to be a consumer of electricity as a community versus part of the generating side of things, which we partner with other communities in ownership of Platte River Power Authority. We don't need to go into the details there, but so those priorities are connected to those goals. Happy to see like partners in the room right now, Republic Services, Compost Queen. We're going to be focusing on how we solve some of the food scraps problems. So that's a priority for council and the move toward being a zero waste community. So you can count on that. You see more around electrification. You see that in fleet and buildings. So those are two major levers that we have some control over, at least some influence over. So those are our priorities. And then with the election, there's so much talk around affordability, especially housing. We're talking about land use, density, how and where people move around our communities, and talking about like very effective land use, efficient buildings, and transportation systems to get people moving around in a way that is less impactful on the environment.
Thank you.
So lots of priorities.
Lots of priorities.
You're not busy.
Yeah, and you're tackling them with a suite of different departments being engaged. How are you tackling those? How are
Yeah,
you
good
getting
question,
your-
because I mean, we talked about, sustainability services, and one of the, I think, beautiful things about the city of Fort Collins is we've had sustainability as a value for a very long time. So, I mean, go back to the 70s with very aggressive, appropriately aggressive conservation measures. In the late 90s, we were one of the early our communities who adopted early on climate action plans. So we've been doing this a lot. And sustainability doesn't just live in sustainability services. I mean, it's in our forestry department, it's in utilities, it's in stormwater, it's in planning, development, transportation. Sustainability is embedded. I mean, it's in the DNA of the organization. So I mean, we handle that, we manage it interdepartmentally, cross-functionally. So when we talk about sustainability, the entire city's working on sustainability.
Yeah.
Big capital S sustainability.
Thank you, and I imagine the same is true in Loveland and in Estes Park for that matter. With or without a plan, there are priorities that are identified and sustainability work going on. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the topics that Jacob touched on, we're gonna be discussing throughout the day. But in Loveland, we have a couple key priorities across all our departments. Flood mitigation is one main topic. We had the Big Thompson flood in 2013. It was one of those 100-year floods, or 1% chance of annual percent chances that could happen in a lifetime. And over the last 10 years, just nationwide, we've seen that trend get higher and higher. So in terms of a project, the Highway 287 flood mitigation project on Highway 287, we're looking to rebuild that bridge that overlaps the Big Thompson River. It's a huge endeavor. It's requiring a lot of federal funding and state funding, which we've had some challenges with, but that will save our residents upwards of $30 million if there were to be another flood that happened. In 2013, when that flood hit, it destroyed the infrastructure, destroyed a lot of the property, and it cost the taxpayers $9.9 million, which is about $35 million today, upwards for adjusted for inflation. And that can happen at any moment. Right now, in our contingency funds, we only have $13 million saved for a potential disaster. So flood mitigation remains one of our top priorities. Wildfire disaster, another main priority. We've seen the fires in California. We've seen fires across the country seem to be getting at a higher and higher rate. Last year, we had the Alexander Mountain Fire, which we had a really great partnership with Loveland and the county and our partners to make sure that was controlled and maintained. But the Marshall Fire, that was also something that we are very concerned about as well, or anything that could stretch into our community. We are not as protected as some people might think from wildfire or natural disaster. So we look at that very strongly. Energy efficiency as well, electrification, EV readiness, that's something, or electric vehicle readiness, and developing the infrastructure for chargers. That's something that we've been working on for a long time with our Public Works Department. But the trend here, and that Heidi alluded to, is that all of our departments and all of our city staff are working hard on various sustainability initiatives. But the problem that I've seen in Loveland is that we don't have a plan. We don't have any sort of sustainability or climate action plan to centralize and get all this really good work that staff are doing and actually share it with the community, share it with our council, and share it with our partners to make sure we can move forward with our goals to reduce emissions overall. So we were lucky enough, and I mentioned at the beginning, that Loveland has had a history with the word sustainability and climate change, and traditionally the council has not been very supportive of it. But in last year, we had a supportive council that was able to agree to developing a plan to allow staff to move forward, to actually take all of this work and develop a community task force to see about creating a sustainability plan or a vulnerability plan, whatever you call it, so that we can centralize this work. There was a caveat Some of you might have remembered in 2023, the Loveland voters passed a ballot measure that reduced our sales tax for food for home consumption, which cut our budget by about $10 million, give or take. And that forced us as an organization to look at all of our services and make cuts where needed. So you've probably seen in the news that Loveland has been cutting a lot of services while still trying to keep and maintain our essential services to function as a government. But this affected climate, affected our work there. So when we went out, this is where the funny part happens. We got funding from the federal government in 2024, and were awarded it in June, and they said, it's coming. And they kept saying it, and then an election happened. And then in February, it was officially announced that it was rescinded. And we have had this unfortunate reality that we're dealing with, and me personally dealing with the federal government as an adversarial, force. So we don't have the funding. We've been looking for other sources. We've also joined and partnered with ICLEI, and they've been a huge help. And we've had a huge help from the county and our partners, and we've been scrounging together what little resources we have to still move this work forward, but it's going to take a lot more time than we hoped. And there's no mincing words. The executive orders from the federal government have put us in a bit of a bind. That combined with, we have a new council that was recently elected last week, a lot of new members, so I'm really excited to see what they do. But from a staff perspective, despite all of these challenges, we're still moving forward with developing some sort of plan, because we know that our staff and our community want this. We need it. We need it. With the wildfire disaster risks increasing, with flood risk happening on the horizon, and also with insurance costs affecting all of us in this room, there are parts of the country that might not be able to get a mortgage because the liability insurance will just not cover certain houses in certain areas. And that continues to grow. And so we're trying to at least prepare for the future and mitigate where we can. And this is the first step, but we're already working on a lot of these different aspects to make sure that we can protect our community for years to come.
What they said.
What they-
I think Estes Park is very similarly situated to Loveland, it sounds like, with respect to lip service at times historically, political will, and the need to balance some things. It sounds like Fort Collins is very sophisticated and leading the charge there probably regionally. The fact that they have sustainability embedded into so much, I think makes it easier to continue the conversation. You're not starting from scratch. Similar to Loveland, I think some of the highest priorities we have are related to wildfire mitigation, flood mitigation. To demonstrate that, we recently had our voters pass a renewal of time-limited sales tax. It was called 1A. And in the new 10-year sales tax, there is funding for the creation of a stormwater utility, essentially. We were able to hire new staff and buy new equipment using those sales tax dollars. And also, there's a large chunk that we're turning over to our local fire district to work on to assist with their fire mitigation efforts. We're probably the most prone to devastation from wildfire just because of where we are located within Estes Park. I am shocked every time I go to the transfer station, which in my household, we go to the recycling facility far more. I talk to my boss, he's like, how? I don't know. We just produce, I guess, less waste, but I go once every 6 weeks or so to drop off garbage at the transfer station. I can't believe how much space is being taken up by yard waste, by branches, by debris, things like that. We have a great relationship with Boulder County, and they have a slash yard that we can take slash to. It's located probably 8 or 10 miles outside of town, and it's much easier for people to drop stuff off at the transfer station, even though they have to pay for it there. So I think that's one thing that we're going to be working on in years to come with the funding that becomes available through the sales tax initiative. And I think it's something that has to be done because we're only gonna be doing more fire mitigation work. Speaking of partnerships, the county, well, actually, I should check the status of this. Last I heard, the county was awarded a $10 million grant to do fire mitigation work, and where do you think they're gonna apply most of that funding? To the west of them, up in Estes Park. And when they're doing that fire mitigation work, that slash is gonna have to go somewhere, and I'd really like to see it not go into the landfill. We may have opportunities to partner with the county or the fire district to create our own sort of slash yard. I should have put the caveat out there at the very outset of this. I am not an environmental sustainability expert. I know enough to be dangerous, but I do rely on staff, oftentimes my wife, who works for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and she is an expert, to help keep me in line. Yeah, that is to say there are specific questions you may have that I'll say, I'll have to get back to you on that when I confer with the appropriate staff. The other thing I think, and Jacob glossed over it, is relates to our part ownership of PRPA. We don't generate the electricity, we distribute it, but we're taking very seriously our role in partnering with PRPA with respect to renewable energy resources, battery storage, DERs, distributed energy resources. Things that are actually necessary for us to, as our mayor, who's on the chair of the board of PRPA says, we always have to strike a balance. There's sustainability and there's also reliability and affordability. Estes Park has a very, very broad representation in terms of political ideologies, and we always are trying to strike the balance. I joke often that my job is to make half the people happy 51% of the time, or 51% of the people happy half of the time. But our local priorities are, everything that the town does has to be linked back to the town board's strategic plan. They adopt a new strategic plan every year, and the provisional strategic plan for 2026, which they'll consider for adoption this month along with our budget, includes several items specific to encouraging alternative renewable energy options. We are currently in the midst of a development code rewrite. It's been made very clear to our consultants and staff for that matter, based on the strategic plans, that renewable energy sources need to be very much thought of as they are considering new requirements for new builds especially, but also incentives that can be provided to folks in the Estes Valley to incentivize move away from certain types of energy towards electrification, really. And I do think, we punch above our weight class with the other owners of the Platte River Power Authority are significantly larger than us. But we do have a significant voice in those discussions. I think those are probably the biggest sustainability priorities for us. Again, I think, in 5 years, we're probably going to be way ahead. I expect we'll be way ahead of where we are now with the continuing efforts of PRPA, with our work with the county, on our own organizational climate action plan, and then regionally with Climate Smart Future Ready.
Yeah, thank you. If Jason mentioned it at the beginning that he's a member of the executive team for Climate Smart Future Ready, and so are the others. And so we do have this special kind of executive level, vision level group who are not necessarily guiding our action teams, but are certainly asking great questions for the action teams to consider. And one of the things that's really popped up, one of the comments that Brett made around emergency response and Jason mentioned this as well, the county receiving funds. These action teams are comprised of so many partners. The Office of Emergency Management is kind of championing our natural disaster team. So we have conservation groups, the Forest Service, all of our municipalities, who are working really hard. Not only did they receive one $10 million grant for up in the Estes Valley, but they received a second $10 million grant. And it's because of these partnerships that are leveraging the kind of work that needs to be done, both from identifying what the issues are and what the priorities are, but who are the partners that are actually gonna do the work? How are we gonna communicate with the property owners and the locations that need the work to be done? All of that requires a lot of hands on deck. And I'm wondering about more examples of partnerships that you've seen that maybe wouldn't have happened in the last 10 years previous to this. Can you think of some partnerships that maybe are unique in the sustainability area?
Yeah, I mean, there's several that come to mind, and actually the example I was gonna share, I'm not gonna share, because I see partner, a lot of sitting next to the county, see a friend and colleague from CSU, and then a friend, we go way back for the Regional Air Quality Council, hey Tom. Around air quality, I mean,
Yeah.
pretty cool partnership. You know, the city doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over some of the enforcement for air quality, but we had some funding, so we helped purchase some equipment that aided in air quality monitoring. It was implemented with researchers at CSU, the county public health and environment, and then the state public CDPHE, Colorado Division of Public Health and Environment, that are taking that data and doing much more specific enforcement from point source polluters, which was technology that we didn't have, data that we didn't have, and enforcement that we didn't have. And that only exists because we pulled our resources and specialty together to address some of the air quality issues. So that's one place where I see that we're like smart partnership and collaboration is making a difference. And instead of all four entities doing their own thing, we're doing it together and having bigger impact. And I think we're bettering the air quality for Northern Colorado. The other partnership I mentioned, because we have some friends and colleagues in the waste sector or the materials capture and reuse sector, partnership with Republic on as a single hauler for the city of Fort Collins. The adoption of that and the partnership around yard waste capture, you talk about the slash, I mean, that has been the single largest expansion of organic material capture and reuse in the city's history. So we talk a lot, we talk about food scraps, and that's super important. We have a pilot program going with Compost Queen. Max, if you want to raise your hand, I'll put a little plug in at the end. I think there's still some spots available for highly subsidized.
Still 85 spots.
Okay, for highly subsidized, very affordable composting, go to compostqueen.com. I'm guessing that's where you go.
FC, Compost Queen FC.
Okay, Compost Queen FC. But anyway, these are examples of partnerships where the city is trying to leverage public-private partnerships to get to some of the goals and outcomes that the community has said is important to them, that we know it's important to city council, and that we need to do if we're going to achieve some of those lofty and ambitious goals that we have in our climate future plan. Couple examples.
Great.
Yeah, and just to tag on, Jacob brings up some really great points. And I think, one takeaway, at least that I would share, I think we would all agree with, is that local governments, especially in this sector, it all requires regional help, regional support. Emissions levels, they're not localized in one city or localized in one municipality. We need to all partner together, not just in Northern Colorado, but across the state and across the nation to make sure that we can actually achieve the emissions goals that the state requires. I know that we've been working, locally in Loveland with partnerships. The county has been a huge, tremendous help in getting us the data we needed to get kick-started essentially and see, what our benchmarks are and figure out how we can improve. But before I moved here, and maybe I'll get yelled out of the room, but I'm not from Colorado. From a trip. Yeah, I know. Boo. Yeah. But I'm from Pittsburgh, which East Coast, traditionally a very heavy coal area, and very similar to kind of the how Colorado got started in the coal industry. But a lot of those coal mines in that area, and all of those communities, 500, 600 people a town, were dealing with kind of the effects of the coal and the steel and all the fossil fuel industries that happened back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s before it declined. And one thing I noticed especially on the East Coast, that I think is a good model for Colorado, is that they did a lot of shared services, partnerships, and agreements, because they themselves and those governments did not have the resources or the staff to actually handle climate, let alone their own operations. There was one town in southwestern PA. It was a town of about 500 people who lived there. There was a city manager who was also the city clerk, who was also the chief IT person, who also opened the doors and closed the doors, who also made sure that all the security was there, and also, you know, got the packets to all the counselors every week. And he was also, sometimes he'd drive them, especially if it snowed pretty bad. And so we have some towns in other parts of the country that don't have the staff able to effectively manage this crisis. And so how they solved it is they had, you know, a series of conglomerates. They had an organization I was a part of called the Congress of Neighboring Communities, which partnered together and developed the skills and the resources and the staff expertise that shared across all these municipalities, where they would pay just a couple $100s and have the staff they need to actually develop a regional climate plan. And so these models are happening across the country, and we're getting to that point too in Colorado. We've had some really great partnerships, but I do think we need to do better, certainly from a government standpoint. I think we need to have more statewide coalitions, and I think they are coming, they are happening, and despite all the news, I think we're still in this space working together, but that's the model. We have to work together, because this is a regional, nationwide, and global issue, and that's how you solve this, you know, being partners and not working in an island.
Yeah, and I also came from the East Coast about 6 years ago. Don't boo me out of the room. I still can't get used to the number of taxing districts we have out here. At least there, you know, a municipality, oversaw a certain number of things that out here are so fragmented, it can be harder to actually develop those partnerships because you have so many different high-level decision makers and not just a few. With respect to new partnerships, I would have to say our partnership with the county is probably the most important one for us, ICLEI as well. And it's for, we have had some other long-standing partnerships that we're working to progress with when it comes to sustainability. But those are probably the newish ones, or definitely the newer ones. We have had long-standing partnerships with organizations in our community. We've got a recycling group, the League of Women Voters, who are very focused on helping us as a community address some of these things. Maybe they're in this room. We have residents who still don't understand that it's actually the county who operates our solid waste operations for the most part, and we have some very hardworking, passionate, knowledgeable residents that we absolutely rely on, at least as staff, professional staff, to help us advocate for certain things to happen, including at the county level. And I think that just hits home the point how important formal partnerships are, with the county, with PRPA, with each other, and some of the regional groups we're part of, but also some of the more grassroots, informal things from our residents. We just had elections. We're supposed to do what our residents want, and sometimes when there are resource limitations or restrictions, we rely on residents to help us out, and especially in the advocacy arena.
Yeah, I was thinking about, there's these partnerships that happen between local governments, and then there's partnerships that require the engagement of nonprofits, small businesses. You know, the state of Colorado adopted a EV charging station plan. It was a guide for statewide with big goals. This is what we're gonna shoot for in order to meet our emission reductions in that sector, in the vehicle emissions sector. Through partnerships with like Drive Clean Colorado, pulling together the details that ultimately created both a roadmap for Larimer County specific and created goals that are linked to the goals that we have for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in our county. It helps us identify, we need this many charging stations and this many electric vehicles. And then there was clarity around, oh, where do we place these things? We went through a whole exercise. We had the school district, the city of Loveland, Thompson School District, city of Loveland, some of our partners at the county through different departments, all putting together these big federal applications for grant funding, which of course were not realized either. Boo. But, you know, those partnerships are still there. That kind of conversation is still there. And that will ultimately lead, I still believe, to understanding where we can best meet those community needs that we've been told, go meet this. Yeah, the partnerships are really important, but it makes me think about these changing times, and it makes me think about, okay, we got climate change, we got economy change, we have community members changing, political changing. How do you guys stay flexible? Like, what do you see as the future for how we're gonna flex ourselves into whatever is thrown at us and still do the work? What do you think?
That's what we're trying to figure out right now. So it's interesting. I mentioned, you know, the city has, you know, robust plans, and, you know, we're exceptional. I really do think that's the right word. We're an exceptional community when it comes to planning. Mike Tyson, who said everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I mean, like you said, there's all this. I think there's also kind of like the Dwight Eisenhower, like plans always work, or planning always works, but plans never do, or something, paraphrase that. So maybe that's better than the Mike Tyson quote. But
I like the Mike Tyson one.
it feels like there's a lot of like punches coming our way. So our plans need to be flexible, and I think that's one thing that we're trying to learn and grow as a city, like a city organization. Say, if things materially change in the external environment, like external to the city organization, don't we have a responsibility to also adapt? So we're trying to figure out, like, hey, if the plan isn't gonna get us to where we wanna go, how do we, like, communicate to our teams? How do we communicate to our community that we're pivoting because we're required to pivot? So that's just something that we're learning, because we are a very heavy planning organization, and we're pretty good at implementation. I think the next evolution of us, like organizationally, is to be more nimble, flexible, and adaptable to the exogenous variables that are kind of influencing how we do our work. And that's, you know, that's the economy, that's external climate factors, it's political factors, geostrategic factors. I mean, you name it all. It impacts what we do and how we do it. So we are on the kind of the learning edge of how to be more adaptable and less planning centric, making sure that we have good plans that underpin our strategic work and our investments around, you know, infrastructure, policy, but also being flexible, because the world is evolving very quickly. Like day to day, it seems like there's always something new.
Yeah.
Partnerships, interdisciplinary, cross-functional teams, and I say leaning into community-led work. The city can't do this alone. I mean, the partnerships that we have amongst ourselves are super important, but the partnerships that we have as organizations with all of you and all of the other folks in our community is, I mean, not just important, it's mission critical if we are gonna get done what we are hoping to get done.
Yeah, those are some good points, and I would just add, it's important to be steady in these turbulent times. We've gone through in Loveland a lot of series of changes, from organizational changes and staff turnover to leadership changes. But, you know, throughout, you know, our own challenges over the last few years, keeping our eyes on the long-term goals remains still critical and key to us moving this forward. There are a lot of changes, a lot of social and technology changes. You know, it's a pro or con, and maybe something to discuss at a future or even today, the AI and how AI is shaping and changing how we do work. Obviously, it's helping us be quicker and be more nimble with developing and having the data that we need and the planning that we need. But there's also a lot of consequences, I think, to AI use that we've seen, in other parts of the country with the data centers polluting rivers and creating huge externalities on energy usage. So we're looking at all of those, but I think overall our goal remains the same, and it's just important to be steady and hear what our residents and what the community is thinking, and hearing from them. And if things change, we'll rely on the community to kind of guide us there, rather than all of the, I guess, the noise that you hear in the news.
Yeah, I like what Brett said about steady, because circumstances can change, have changed, and you can't just go full steam ahead on certain things because elected officials turn over, staff turns over, and their priorities may not be the same as previous elected officials or boards. I like steady because you can establish flexible goals with priority or policy statements that you work towards, and it's important that you communicate that you're continuing to work towards them even if you have to pump the brakes sometimes. Or change things, like take the word emissions out of documents and things like that, depending on what is required. I actually had last week, earlier this week, I don't know what day it is anymore because we got off yesterday. I had a conversation with one of my staff people in utilities who was a little bit frustrated with some of the language in our provisional strategic plan, because instead of saying, here's exactly what we're going to do, it says, we're going to encourage this, we're going to support this, we're going to advocate for that. What does that mean? I completely get where this person was coming from, and I had to say, part of our job is to take the strategic plan and actually bring to them questions about what they want us to do to support, educate, or advocate. It's one of these things where we will get there, we will get to that place, and maybe it's as simple as we'll just write PRPA a letter, or mayor as a representative say this at one of your meetings. And other places it could be, well, we want you to establish specific goals related to energy consumption or transition to a renewable energy source, things like that. So flexible, steady, and communication is going to be critical. I think communication is probably the most important thing any of us do. But you don't want to give people false hope, and you want to be clear that we are working towards some things that may just take longer than we hoped it would take. That's because of the political realities, financial realities, those sorts of things.
Yeah, making things sustainable, evergreen is kind of, it's a trick, it's always a trick.
Yeah, well, and Jacob said in Fort Collins, sustainability is so much more than environment, and I've worked in places like that, and it's because everything is interrelated. You talk about economic development as part of sustainability, and that's right. In order for something to be sustainable, you might not be able to go full speed ahead, otherwise it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, great point. So you all have heard a little bit about partnerships and the sustainability here for our local governments. Please help me give them a hand.